Down to Business
on News Talk.
Sponsored by Bank of Ireland. Here to support your business as it keeps building for years to come with dedicated business teams.
Now, I'm very excited because when we think of watchmakers and watchmaking, we might think of Swiss luxury brands like Patek Philippe, Omega, or my own favourite, Breitling. But one Irish man has made a name for himself and is one of the finest watchmakers in the world. And I'm honoured to be joined by him now. He's Stephen McGonigal. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thanks very much, Bobby. Delighted
now,
to be here.
We don't know a lot of Irish watchmakers, so maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this business, and again, your Swiss experience, and just to set the scene for us, if you would, Stephen.
Sure, yeah. So, thanks for having me, Bobby. I got into it because my dad, essentially, he did, like, he was in the print business. He worked for the Irish Times, but as a hobby, he did clocks and watch repair. And then my brother went to the college actually in Blanchardstown. There used to be a watch college in Blanchardstown.
Horology, isn't that the
Exactly,
technical term?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the college was excellent. You know, it was a 3-year course, and it was sponsored by the Swiss watch industry. And unfortunately, it's not there anymore. But I went to the same college, and from there, I did a year in antique watch repair in London, and from there to Switzerland.
Right.
And I went in on the deep end in Switzerland because I started doing what we call complications. Complications are watches that do more than just tell the time, basically.
I was going to ask you about that because it's a great term. I was looking at one of your previous employment titles. You went to, is it Bregut, as head of after sales service for complications.
Yeah,
but you're saying I'm in charge of complications.
I create complications. Yeah, no, it is a strange term, but it's essentially like the watch you have in front of you. They're chronographs, so they would go under the term.
Okay, so a complication is a watch that does more than tell the time.
Exactly. Yeah,
okay, and tell me about the landscape out in Switzerland, where they're known for their craft. They value, the whole industry so highly. It must be like a real privilege to work in that environment where the trade is so respected.
Yeah, absolutely. And towns and villages, survive around the industry in some places, and you can't escape it. And there are pockets of it where it's very, very concentrated. And then the names you just mentioned, you have the finest brands in the world, and they're side by side, factory side by side. It's very unusual,
So it implies the watchmaking business then, or industry, would be a huge employer right across Switzerland.
Huge employer. They even have terms for the holidays. They call them the watch holidays because the factories shut down all at the same time.
Wow.
So it's a huge employer.
Now tell me then, and we'll talk about these beautiful watches that you've brought in a second, but I'm intrigued to know about the process of actually building a watch. How intricate is it? How long does it take? Just those kind of things.
Yeah, so this new project, so this is a new brand. This Magan is the brand.
Magan, yeah, okay.
And it's quite different. Well, yeah, it's quite different to my original brand, McGonigal watches, because the process early on, design development is similar, but they diverge. Where with the McGonigal watch, I do finish each and every component by hand and then put it together. So it's a very slow process, and there's only a limited production. This is where I work with Swiss companies to make higher volumes. But the quality, and I work with the very best brands in the world, in Switzerland, to put this together. So it's similar to McGonigal, where development. These were 3 years in development.
Right.
And I'm at the stage now where I have all my components, all the equipment ready, and assembly is essentially now what I've.
And how many, typically, approximately, how many components are there in a watch?
It can vary greatly from a couple of hundred to several hundred,
Wow.
depending on the.
And if you go back to Switzerland, then are there different people then making all different bits?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you've got to go and.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, geez, it sounds fantastic.
Sometimes a microscopic component, it could be a factory making just a single component,
Well, and again, just in terms of how long your traditional watches would take, say if you're making a watch by hand, would it take a week, 2 weeks, a day?
No, you're talking a couple of months for the simplest one, and then the most complicated one McGonigal watch makes, which is, again, we go back to complications. The minute repeater actually chimes out the time, so in the hours, quarters, and minutes, completely mechanically. That's got several hundred parts in it, and that can take a few months to build.
Wow.
And that's when you have the parts in front of you. So I mean, the development and design behind it is several years.
Let's go back to the Magan brand now, because I think this is maybe we'll use the word affordable, but if we talk affordable, we're still talking $5 or $6 grand a watch here, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly not cheap. I mean, but I mean.
And what does that reflect, that price? Just to talk about that for a second. So it's obviously, it's the time, it's the precision engineering,
exactly,
it's the quality of the materials.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned a few brands there. Like if we take even just one component, like the face, the dial of the watch, my dials, they're extremely complicated to make already. There's several companies who work together to make just that one with me.
Wow.
And it's hand painted. So like the companies you've named, Patek Philippe, don't hand paint their dials. But that is hand painted.
My God, it's absolutely. And this watch that I have in front of me here, folks, from the Magan range, this was developed with Irish rugby in mind, and I can tell you Stephen is adorned in an Irish rugby jersey. He's going to the New Zealand game and he's bringing a watch with him, but the strap on this watch is the same quality and feel as a rugby ball. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah.
And how did you develop that?
So I had that in my head very early on. Like the watch is essentially inspired by rugby. Like every watch, much like architecture and things, it needs inspiration, and I use rugby. If you look at I know you're a rugby fan yourself, Bobby, but if you look around, the dial for the case itself is the shape of a rugby ball.
Yeah.
The pushers for the chronograph are the shape of a rugby ball, but they're subtle touches, you know.
Yeah, but it's you can really see it, particularly when I'm holding it here in my hand. It's absolute, and the weight of the watch again tells me quality.
And actually, it could be a lot heavier. It's a titanium case, so titanium is lighter, but to go back to the strap, I went to a company in Switzerland that makes straps, and again, that's a hand stitched strap. And I brought a rugby ball, and I said, "Lads, this is what I want." And they use really high tech engineering, the lasers to scan the ball, and then we came down to that.
Isn't that fantastic? And tell me then, Stephen, about and again, you clearly have you're on top of your craft, the marketing of the watches, and even the idea about siding up to Irish rugby and that. Tell me more about that process. To build a business through a brand, and that's one way of doing it, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for me. I mean, I'm a watchmaker. I'm not in marketing, So, and as a small independent, the budget's not there either,
Yeah.
So it's quite difficult. Like part of my marketing for this is I've partnered with Robbie Henshaw as part of the company.
Right.
And he's going to be a big help to push the brand, and
and again, cleverly, I think again, that's the way things are done now. You get your ambassador, you make sure that he's compatible with what you're doing, and then off you go. And it's he's part of the team just as much as you are.
Absolutely, yeah. He wore one of the watches to the Lions tour.
Right.
He's been wearing one watch for a year now, I think. But it's good to get feedback off him, and it's really important.
And what next then for the business? Where are you thinking of bringing it?
So I already have 2 more projects started. Two more watches essentially, and just to continue promoting. It literally launched this week, so it's very early days, but literally push these two models, and then keep working. Because as an independent, part of the marketing is if you don't come out with something new, people will forget.
Yeah. There's a text in from Karen which asks, does your guest have a website? Somebody who's clearly interested in it.
I do, thanks for asking. It's maganwatches.com, so Magan is MAGON.
Yeah.
Maganwatches.com.
Okay, and Magan being an abbreviation of McGonigal, or some of the thinking was around that, I'm sure.
I had friends, that was sort of my nickname,
Yeah.
I think it's a great word for small, it's easy to pronounce.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything bad in any other language.
What about, again, I suppose the retail arm of selling watches now? If we go to Weir's or we go to, Harrods or wherever it is, and there's halls of watches with all the various brands competing on the world stage, all charging, fairly hefty prices. Tell us a little bit about that. Is that a bit of a dogfight?
Completely, yeah. Yeah, completely. And I mean, in many ways we can't compete with them at all. For most of my career and with the brands I have, my watches, especially the McGonigal watches, the customers found me.
Yeah.
They've found the brand, and it's collectors for the most part. The big boys, they've got millions in marketing, and they're always pushing their brand. So we have to think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah.
And no, it's very tough.
Now, my guest is Stephen McGonigal. He's a watchmaker and horologist of note. There's loads of texts coming in here. Stephen, you might just help me with one or two of them. How could someone get into watchmaking is one question. And does your guest take on apprenticeships is a second question.
So to get into it, unfortunately, it's not
difficult, is it?
Unfortunately, the school's not in Ireland anymore, which is a real shame. But there are courses you can do in English, in Switzerland and in England. So it's possible there are colleges that do horology.
And what length of period would you be talking about to get proficient at the skill and craft that it is?
Yeah, it's a funny career because I'm still learning today. So the course I did to just get me on my feet was 3 years. So I know there are courses that are year and a half, but that's really just to get you going.
Yeah.
Do
you worry at all about what happened to camera, Stephen? When you look at, everybody now has a watch on their phone.
Yeah.
Everyone has a camera on their phone, and it seems to have impacted on the actual individual camera. Is there a danger that could happen at watches, particularly at the low end?
I think it definitely had an impact, and like the iPhone or the iWatch.
Yeah.
I mean, that people didn't stop talking about that when it came out in Switzerland. What impact would it have? And it did certainly have an impact on the big brands with the big volumes. But on the other hand, independent watchmaking and small independent watchmakers, that side of the market has exploded because people have, they used to be interested in Rolex or Patek, or I know I have clients who've gotten rid of all their, the big brand names, and they only collect independent watchmakers.
Yeah, and there's probably then an element of if you're small and you're nimble, personalization. So if I come to you and I've an endless budget and I want whatever watch I want, you can create it for me.
Absolutely, yeah. And with the people I work with as well, they're all very, very flexible. Actually, when and where I can, I work with Irish people as well. My sister Frances, she's an artist. She's heavily involved in McGonigal watches. So,
yeah.
And as you said, somebody can ask for a particular engraving, whatever. It's always possible.
Well, I can tell you, and it's a pity our listeners can't see these, but we might take a photo of them and put them up on our website. But they're absolutely beautiful pieces of work. And I think it's a magnificent craft, and well done to you, Stephen McGonigal, and go off and enjoy the rugby game, and hopefully you might sell a few watches while you're there.
Down to Business on News Talk.
Sponsored by Bank of Ireland. Here to support your business as it keeps building for years to come with dedicated business teams.